Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. This story didn't happen to me and isn't mine directly. It happened to my aunt back in the mid to late 90s when she was still a teenager. I asked her if I could share the story, and she said that she would prefer if I did, just in case it could help someone else avoid a similar situation. Though, I don't know if anyone would ever be in a similar situation in the current day and age that we're in. That said, I'm going to tell this story from my memory, so if some parts seem inconsistent or maybe a bit confusing, I do apologize in advance. Like I said, this was back when my aunt was a teenager. She was a pretty well-liked young woman. She was a good kid, straight-A student, and she was well known and held in a high regard in the neighborhood as being a dependable babysitter. She loved spending time with kids, and the kids loved her, and she had done a good amount of volunteer work over the summer with a daycare at our local church group. Basically, people in the area knew that if they needed someone to take care of their kid for a couple of hours, they could call her and not worry about anything. She ended up going into childcare and actually owns a local daycare today, if that helps to explain how much she loved and loves working with children. This specific situation happened when she got a call from a couple a few blocks away. It was the expected story. They wanted to have a date night and just needed someone to watch their young daughter for a few hours. They said that they would pay her $10 an hour to watch her from 5 to 11, and my aunt agreed and everything seemed like it was pretty standard. Now, this was back in the 90s. Almost no one had a cell phone. The internet wasn't really a thing yet, and a lot of people just trusted people in their neighborhood based solely on the fact that they were in their neighborhood. It was a totally different time from today, where we are way more protective in our daily lives. My aunt and grandparents didn't know anything about the couple, which wasn't out of the ordinary, and while this situation really didn't seem out there, things got strange pretty much right off the bat. My grandfather dropped my aunt off and she knocked on the door of the couple, but at first, no one answered her. She stood there for a few moments and then knocked again, and after a few minutes, the man of the house finally did answer the door. She said that he apologized for not hearing her knock sooner and that he was in the bathroom getting things ready. After that, my aunt says that she entered the house and noticed that it was incredibly clean and also minimalist. The living room was pretty much just an old couch, a chair, and a television. There was a lamp in the corner for light, but that was it. There were no pictures, no toys, nothing to indicate that this family had a young child or was even a family at all. She ignored this and thought that maybe they just didn't have much in ways of money. She then turned to ask the man about the daughter, the basics really, her name, the emergency contact information, the schedule, and any rules that she needed to abide by. She said that at first, the man had a look about his face that made it seem like he was nervous, like he was thinking of an answer to the questions on the spot. And after a few moments, he cleared his throat and then responded. Her name is Abigail. If there is an emergency, call my mother. Her phone number is on the fridge, and her name is Beth. Scheduling and rules won't really be an issue. Abigail is too young to do anything, and she'll most likely be asleep the whole night in her crib. At this point, my aunt had a few things click for her. There weren't any toys because Abigail was still a newborn, and this could have also explained the lack of pictures on the wall of the family. She nodded and told him that she understood and asked if Abigail had a feeding schedule and asked if they were trying to keep things on a strict timeline. She said that at this point, the man just shook his head and told her to not bother Abigail while she slept, and if she didn't wake up crying, to just let her sleep. Obviously, my aunt was a bit confused. When you have a baby that young, you typically don't just let them sleep. You keep them on a schedule and then keep things consistent. But she was also doing this based on the parents' terms, so she didn't fight or argue about it. After a few moments of talking, the man said something that caught my aunt off guard. He said something along the lines of, "I know you probably had a long day at school and you'll probably want to take a shower at some point. If you do, the shower is upstairs, second door on the left. Feel free to use it if you need to." How many weird or red flags is this at this point? 1, 2, 3? Well, there was another that happened immediately after this comment. After insisting that she could take a shower, the man said that they needed to go and then thanked her for taking her time to watch their daughter. He then opened the front door, got in the car, and started to drive off, leaving my aunt there alone with Abigail. It may not be obvious what the red flag was in that situation, but my aunt immediately realized that something was off. At no point did the mother of the child come out of any room in the house. She hadn't met her, and the man just left without her. At this point, it seemed like there wasn't a mother in the situation. Again, my aunt thought that maybe she didn't understand the situation. Maybe the man had to pick her up from work. Maybe they were meeting up somewhere. So she let it go and just sat on the couch to watch TV. She sat there for a little while and watched whatever was on. But after a while, she says that something didn't feel right, which, yeah, obviously. She said that something in her told her that she should check on Abigail, even though the father had said she didn't need to. She got up and then started up the stairs and realized that she didn't know which room was hers. There were 2 doors on the left and 1 on the right, and she knew that the second one on the left was the bathroom. So she checked the first one on the left. It was a small room that looked like it should have been a bedroom, but there was no bed in it. She said that the room was an absolute mess, with trash everywhere, and off to the side was a small desk with a computer just sitting on it. Since that wasn't the room, she assumed that maybe Abigail's crib was in the master's bedroom. She went over to the other room and opened the door, only to find nothing but a mattress and box spring on the floor and a single dresser. She looked in the room and there was no crib. There was no indication of a small child, just the bed and the dresser. Much like the living room, an incomplete contrast to the other room, it was completely clean. It was at this point that a few things became a little more clear. 1, this guy was a bit off, putting it lightly. 2, there was no daughter. Abigail didn't exist, and she was babysitting a non-existent child. And 3, this guy's insistence that she take a shower was all the more creepy by the fact that the first 2 things were true. She closed the doors and went back downstairs. She then grabbed the phone and quickly called her house. She explained to her dad that there was no baby there and told him about how weird the guy was. My grandpa told her that he would drive over and park on the street and wait for the guy to get back to make sure nothing happened. After about 4 or 5 hours, the guy came back and his creepy vibes escalated. She said that when he got back, the first thing he asked her was if she had taken the shower. She told him that she didn't, and said that he seemed legitimately upset about this fact, to the point that he actually asked her why she hadn't. She said that she didn't, and then moved on, telling him that Abigail was quiet all night and that she needed to get going now that he was home. When she went to leave, she said that he stepped to the door and told her that she didn't need to rush out and that the night was still young. She said that he pretty much turned to sleeve up to 11 at this point and was looking her up and down and telling her that she could make herself comfortable if she wanted to. She looked at him and told him directly that she had already called her dad and that he was sitting just outside waiting for her to come out, and that he would be likely coming up to the door if she didn't go. For a moment, he seemed to be sizing her up and trying to determine if she was lying about this. But eventually he relented, saying something like, "Well, we wouldn't want to keep him waiting." He opened the door, and my aunt walked out, and he quickly shut it behind her. She took over to my grandpa's car and got in quickly before she realized that, in everything that had just happened, he didn't even pay her for her time. And honestly, the money didn't even matter to her anymore. She just wanted to go home. My aunt said that she explained everything to my grandfather, and while he believed that this guy was a creep, he said that he hadn't technically done anything illegal or wrong, so there wasn't much that could be done. And even so, my aunt didn't babysit for anyone that wasn't an immediate neighbor or family after that. And she holds on to the thought that, had my grandfather not been parked outside and waiting, things would have gone much, much worse. This all happened back when I was 15 years old, and I was a bit of a socially awkward teen. I didn't have many friends, and I didn't really socialize a whole lot beyond the basic social media stuff, so I would sometimes watch my cousins for a few bucks every now and then. That said, because I had some experience watching kids, my dad's friend, Alex, asked him if I would be available to help him out during summer break. Alex was in his mid-30s and was now a single father to a 6-year-old son named Max. His wife, Sherry, had passed away due to some sort of heart complication, something that wasn't diagnosed at all, and then it just took her suddenly. Because of this, Alex was basically killing himself, working 2 jobs to keep food on the table and keep the lights on. When all of this happened, summer break had just started, so Alex was in a situation where he needed someone to watch Max all day, but obviously, he didn't have the money to pay for any sort of childcare for 12 plus hours a day for 5 to 6 days a week. So, this is where I came into the picture. My dad had mentioned to me that if I took up watching Max over the summer, he would pay me $50 a week. He knew that Alex couldn't afford it, but we were well off enough that he could cover it for him. I was 15, like I said, so $50 a week and $200 a month for the summer? You could bet that I was going to take that. Plus, I always thought that Max was adorable, and I knew that he was a good kid, so it was a win-win really. The first day I was watching Max, I got there early, and Alex hadn't yet left for work. He was telling me all the basic rules, and that there were chicken nuggets for his lunch in the freezer, and basically all the things that you would expect from a parent. And then he went into how much he appreciated me doing this for free, and that he was sorry that he was taking my summer from me. I explained to him that I really didn't have any plans, and I loved Max, so it was really not a big deal to me. He then went into how his sister was watching him after school, but she basically told him that she wasn't willing to watch him for the entire day if he wasn't going to pay her. To me, That was a bit shocking. It was surprising to me that a family member wasn't willing to help out, especially with the situation that Alex is currently in. But I reassured him that I was happy to help and that I was sorry that he was going through all that he was. He then left for work, and I just sat on the couch and turned on the TV while Max was still asleep and wasn't likely to wake up for a few more hours. Honestly, watching Max for the first few days was pretty normal. My dad would drop me off in the morning, and then I would fall asleep on the couch watching TV until Max woke me up, and then we would make him breakfast. We would watch some movies, play some games, and just have a good time until his dad got home. Honestly, I was really happy with it overall, and I thought that it was going to be a great summer. But then, at some point in the second week, it was early in the morning and I was still asleep on the couch. I heard a crash coming from the kitchen. I quickly sat up and I saw Max in the kitchen, looking like he was absolutely petrified when he saw that I was awake. He just stared at me with his face bright red. I saw him in his pajamas, cereal and milk on the floor, and a bowl sitting upside down next to him. It was pretty clear what had happened, but for some reason, Max screamed as loud as he could and then ran through the hallway into his room and then slammed his door while screaming in tears. He kept yelling that he was really sorry over and over again while shrieking in tears. I was legitimately confused. I had no idea what was going on. He had spilled his cereal, and while he wasn't supposed to be getting his own breakfast like that, for this very reason, I wasn't upset or anything. But he was screaming like crazy. I got up and I went back to his room and I knocked on his door asking him what was wrong. He was refusing to answer me and just kept screaming that he was sorry. I went in and I knelt down to talk to him. I told him that it was okay and that we just needed to clean up the mess. I told him that it wasn't a big deal at all and that he didn't need to freak out. At first, he didn't seem like he trusted me, but he eventually took a deep breath and said okay, and we went out and cleaned up the mess. He went through the rest of the day like normal, and I didn't push it with him and thought that maybe he was just in a weird mood. Then about a week later, we were having fun and he wanted to paint something. I thought that sounded like fun. So I got this kid paints and paper set up in the kitchen. We were just having fun making random paintings when he accidentally spilled the water that he was cleaning the brush with on the floor. Once again, his face turned red and he went absolutely crazy with his crying and screaming and then tried to run to his room. It was literally the same situation a few days prior, but this time I was able to get a hold of him and stop him. The look in his eyes were legitimate horror as he was belting out his apologies at the top of his lungs with tears pouring out of his eyes. I told him to calm down and that it wasn't a big deal and that we would just go ahead and get it cleaned up and then finish our paintings. Once again, he looked like he didn't trust me, like I was going to do something more than just clean up and move on. I told him to breathe and that he needed to calm down because everything was okay. After a few moments, he nodded and took a deep breath and then told me that it was okay. At this point, I felt like I needed to get to the bottom of this. Part of me was worried that it was Alex that was doing something to make him act like this. Honestly, he seemed like such a good guy that I couldn't see him doing it. I sat him down on the couch and I knelt in front of him. Then I asked why he got so scared when he spilled the water. He told me that it was because he had made a mess. I told him that it wasn't really a big deal when he made a mess. We just had to clean it up and be more careful. Then I asked why he thought that it was such a big deal. At first, he didn't seem to want to tell me, but eventually he started talking to me about it. He said that when he made a mess at Aunt Marie's house, he got punished. In my eyes, punishing a kid would be sending them to their room or taking something away from them for a period of time. But obviously, something worse was going on over at that aunt's house. I was a bit nervous, but I eventually asked him what his aunt would do when he got in trouble. And what he told me made me sick. Apparently, when he got in trouble over at his aunt's house, she was verbally abusive. She yelled at him, and he didn't like the yelling. But then it got worse. He told me that when he did something bad, after the yelling, she would seriously shut him in the dryer. She would put him in the dryer and then shut the door, holding it shut until he stopped crying. He said that when he made a mess while I was watching him, he thought that I was going to put him in the dryer and then shut him in, which is why he ran into his room and was telling me how sorry he was. I was shocked. I told him that I would never do that and that he didn't have to worry about that ever happening with me. To which he said that he liked me more than his aunt and then gave me a hug. I honestly wanted to cry when this happened, but I just told him that it was okay, and then we went back to painting. When Alex got home, I asked him if I could talk to him, and I explained what Max had told me about his aunt. And Alex was as appalled as I was. He told me that he had no idea. He just thought that Max didn't like it over there because of his cousins. Well, there's not much to the story, honestly. I watched Max the whole summer, and then he came over to our house after school when we went back. Alex was able to get his life together and got remarried, and they're a happy family now. Max is 11 now and he's a smart kid, and I don't think he really remembers what happened back then. From what I know, Alex confronted his sister about the situation, and she claimed that it never happened. But I'm pretty certain that Alex believed his son. I certainly did. To the best of my knowledge, Alex hasn't spoken to Marie since he talked to her about it, and I don't blame him. I just hope that whatever Marie did doesn't scar Max, and that he grows up to be a normal, happy person. This may not be a standard babysitting horror story, but it's still worth sharing, and there's actually a few things to share. I may send more over to you later if you want, but these are some of the worst. I have been working as a lead at a daycare for around 13 years now, and it's almost entertaining how unfiltered kids are when you get them talking, and how much they imitate those that they're around frequently. What kind of sucks about this is that when a kid does something that's iffy or questionable, we have to contact CPS by law and then report what happened. One instance of this happened actually pretty recently with a little boy, and we'll call him Jim. One day during the morning, while the kids were playing, I was making coffee and Jim walked up to me. I was putting my creamer and sugar in the mug, and Jim asked me if I liked to smell the sugar. I was a bit confused at first. Why would I smell sugar? I told him that I wasn't sure what he was talking about, and he then tells me that sometimes while he's at his uncle's house, his uncle likes to smell the sugar. I asked what he meant, and then he tells me that his uncle likes to smell the sugar off the table with a straw. Come to find out, while his uncle was watching him, he decided that it would be okay to do cocaine in front of him and just tell him that it's sugar. Another one that's worth talking is about what happened with a little girl in my group named Sasha. Sasha was a sweetheart. She was incredibly quiet and soft-spoken, but she was also one of the nicest little girls that I have ever met. One day, her dad brought her in and she had a bruise on her face. Obviously, my mind went to a dark place and I told her dad that I had to legally ask what had happened. He tells me that he didn't know, that she had the bruise when he had gotten home from work the night before, and she wouldn't tell him no matter how much he asked. He seemed sincere about this and said that he thinks that she fell or something when she was doing something that she wasn't supposed to, and she didn't want to get into trouble, so she's not saying anything. I accepted his response and we went on. At around lunch, she said that she wanted to tell me something and asked if I could keep a secret. I told her I could, of course, and I asked what was wrong. She told me that she was sorry that she had lied to her dad about her bruise, but he didn't want him mad because his girlfriend had given it to her. Apparently, her dad's girlfriend was verbally and now physically abusive to this little girl, and the dad was none the wiser. I, of course, told him and filled out my report to protective services. I really felt bad for the dad, but I had no choice in the matter. And the last one is probably the saddest one for me and happened when I was still fairly new to working at a daycare. There was a little boy that attended our daycare named Adam. Adam was incredibly shy, but absolutely loved being in the daycare because of how much he got to socialize. I know that sounds like opposites, but he was more like he was shy until he got to know you. Adam's father was a police officer for the city and was a fairly well-respected guy. Adam was very clearly proud of how much of a hero his dad was, and he would talk about it a lot. Then, one day, while I was sitting at one of the tables, Adam says something about people are coming to get him. I asked him what he meant, and he said that Daddy says that some of the bad people he arrested are going to come and get us. I was kind of just like, okay. And I said that I wanted to hear more. And he goes on to say that his daddy had put a duct tape over his windows and put a camera in his room to watch him, just to make sure that the bad guys didn't break in. I really didn't know what to do with this, and I probably shouldn't have, but I actually contacted his father about the situation, asking if everything was alright at home, because Adam was saying things that didn't make sense. His dad laughed and just said that Adam just had a wild imagination. I agreed with him, said it was okay, and then I hung up. Unfortunately, I have no idea what happened after that because Adam never came back to the daycare. His father had resigned, and apparently they moved away within the next week. I don't know if this was for protection or if his dad was legitimately paranoid. So yeah, kids can say some crazy things, and I have more that I may send your way, but I just want to use this as an opportunity to say that kids do not have filters. If you tell your kids something, or if you do something in front of your kids, they will 100% repeat it, or will happily go on telling someone else all about it. When I was in high school, I used to watch my two baby nephews, Ben and Sammy, a few times a week over at my brother Terrence's house during the week. My brother was a pretty chill guy, and I loved spending time with my little cousins, so really, it wasn't that big of a deal to me to lose a few nights during the week. They were pretty young still, and they were still in that age range where they could easily be entertained by SpongeBob and chicken nuggets, while I messed around with my phone or on my DS. It was really just like I had a couple of younger brothers that needed my attention every now and then, and I loved it. My brother had always been a good kid, but as he got a bit older, he ended up getting with the wrong crowd and fell in love with a woman that was a terrible influence on him. Kaylee. Kaylee was a user, and I mean of both people and substance. And fortunately, Terrence wanted to see the best in her and decided that she was worth his time. They ended up getting together, but not married, and they had 2 kids together, Ben and Sammy. At some point after Sammy's first birthday, Kaylee got picked up for attempting to shoplift from a big box store and then got her basic misdemeanor charge changed to a pretty hefty felony when the police found a significant amount of meth in her purse, like enough for her to be charged with intent to distribute. All of this is important because it's what left my brother in charge of 2 young boys as a single father, and is why I had to watch them several times a week while he worked his second job. And now, this ritual of him working nights and me watching them for him had been going on for around 6 months at this point, and without issue. And with Kaylee in prison for years, I thought that it would just keep being a smooth situation. Well, I thought wrong. It was a pretty normal Tuesday night at Terrence's house, and I was there watching the boys, and they were watching some cartoons while I was making dinner, when I heard a knock on the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I thought maybe it was an Amazon package or something, just knocking to let us know that it was delivered. So I just kept making dinner and I ignored it for a moment. But then I heard the doorbell ring. At this point, Ben walks in the room to tell me that Aunt Becca was at the door. Rebecca, or Aunt Becca as he said, was Kaylee's sister and was just as bad as her, if not worse than Kaylee. On top of that, Terrence had a no-contact order against her. She wasn't supposed to be there, and she wasn't supposed to be near the kids. I told Ben to take Sammy into his room and stay there, and that I would be up in a moment, and then I sent a quick message to Terrence that basically said, "Rebecca is at the door, telling her to leave." I then unlocked the door, but keep the chain connected, and opened the door slightly, asking if I can help her. She stares at me for a second, and then huffs and lets out a snide chuckle. "I'm here to see my nephews. Where's Terrence?" I tell her that Terrence isn't here and that she would need to come back another time to talk to him about the situation. She then tells me that I need to let her in to see her nephews right then and there. At this point, Terrence is calling me, so I put the phone on speaker and I tell him that I was just informing Rebecca that she needed to leave. She starts yelling at me and at the phone, saying that she has a right to see her family and that he can't keep them from her. He calmly but directly says, "Rebecca, you need to leave. If you're not gone in 3 minutes, my brother will be calling the police and telling them that you're currently violating a restraining order. You aren't supposed to be anywhere near my sons, and you aren't supposed to be on my property. Phil, if she's not gone in 3 minutes, call the cops." I agreed, and he said to call him back and let him know what's going on and that he would be home soon, and then he hung up. At this point, Rebecca is screaming at me about how I'm ruining her life and calling me every derogatory and racist name that she can pull out of her mouth. I once again firmly tell her to leave, and I go to shut the door. She tries to push her hand in the gap to stop it from closing, but I wasn't having any of it. I kept pushing the door against her fingers, and if she was going to try to force her way in, then I was going to use force to keep her out. And after a few seconds of what I'm assuming was tremendous pain, she pulls her fingers back and I slam the door, locking the deadbolt and the knob. She starts yelling about how she's going to kill me and how I'm going to regret everything. I give her the 3 minutes, and by the end of it, she's in her car and driving off. So I text Terrence and let him know that she's gone, but that she was being incredibly violent with her words. He then tells me that if he sees her or a car that looks like hers drive by again, that I need to call the cops immediately and then tell them what happened. I did agree, and then we move on with the rest of the night. I give the boys their food. They're happy and full, and Ben asked if they can go play in their room. I told them it was fine, and honestly, my mind was on the possibility of Rebecca coming back, so it was best that they were in their room just in case. After about an hour of me sitting and watching SpongeBob myself, and listening to the boys play upstairs, I get up to go and check on them, and no sooner than I stood up, I heard what sounds like a loud smack on the front door, and the sound of the glass breaking. I duck, and I freak out. I grab my phone and I run upstairs into my nephew's room. I shut the door, and I call 911 immediately. Honestly, a good portion of this is a blur. I don't recall the phone call really. I think a lot of what I said to them was pure instinct, and a lot of my action was pure adrenaline. I thought that this crazy woman was seriously trying to break into the house to get to us, and I honestly thought that there was a high possibility that I was going to be killed and my nephews kidnapped. After standing in the room with my back against the door for several moments and telling the 911 operator about the situation, she said that the police would be there within a few minutes and to stay in the room. What I hated the most about this was that my nephews were just looking at me. Sammy was too young to process what was going on beyond me being in the room to play with them, and Ben just old enough to know that I was scared of something. I just sat on the floor and just wait, telling the boys to go back to playing. And they do. I am holding back tears, just waiting for what felt like an eternity for the police to arrive, and in reality, it was just 9 minutes. But it really felt like an hour. When I heard the police announce themselves, I told the boys to stay in the room and that I would be right back. I went out, and there were 2 officers standing at the door with their guns drawn, and several more cars in front of the house with their spotlights shining around the area. I let the officers in and they asked if I'm okay or if anyone else was in the house. I tell them that I was watching my nephews and that the person that did this was likely their aunt. I explained the night to them, and they asked that I contact Terrence and see if he could come home. A long story short, and to skip over the conversation with the police, Rebecca had come back and thrown a brick through the garage windows and through the bay window in the living room. Even creepier, she had thrown a dead squirrel at the door, and that's what the initial thump was before the bricks came through the window. This woman had lost her mind and was legitimately trying to show how crazy she was. And while I was scared enough to pretty much piss my pants, I was horrified at the thought that she would have been willing to throw a brick through the living room window where one of her nephews could have seriously been sitting. She could have killed one of them easily if they would have been in the room. Thankfully, it was just me and they were upstairs playing. The police took the statement and they put out a call for her. They asked the neighbors if they had seen anything and all that. My brother bought security cameras for the window after that night, just in case. But from what I recall, she was picked up by the cops and won't be getting out anytime soon. So, Rebecca, the absolutely insane woman that happens to be my nephew's aunt, I hope you and I never meet again. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I would also like to give some extra love to my Patreon members, my channel members, and also my tippers. Thank you so much. If you would like to extend a little bit more support for the channel, don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to become a Patreon member, a channel member, a tipper, or even to buy merch, check out the links in the description below. Again, thank you. And I hope you stay scared because your fear feeds me.